Hello and welcome to this Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video with me, Oddworld Inhabitant, as your host. So, in the last video of the series, we talked about the troop choices in the Guard Codex, and I explained how veteran squads, whilst good individually, you can't take too many of them, so you're never going to achieve that critical mass. Guardsman squads, you can take so many of them, you can achieve vast numerical superiority, and that's what you need because your guys can't go one-to-one with other people. So I'm continuing on with that, and in this video we're going to be looking at another way of buffing your blobs, because we've already looked at how orders can make your blobs much better, and we've already looked at, and at the same time we've already looked at how psychic powers can buff your blobs, and the two together make a very strong combination with rerolls to hit and rerolls to do damage. But in order for this to go off, you need to, in order for your blobs to achieve maximum sort of damage output, survivability, whatever you put it, maximum effectiveness, you need to take advantage of the advisors in the Guard Codex. Now there are three main advisors that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Commissars, as you can see from this video's picture, priests, and primarily Psykers. Now I'm actually going to go with the one that I like the least, and then work with the two that I think actually do work. So this is good. I can straight away tell this is going to get some raised eyebrows. But if you're taking a 30-40 man blob squad, and you've got 4 heavy weapons in there, let's say 4 special weapons, you don't actually want to take a Minotaur and Priest. They're 25 points, and for 25 points, what you get is you get Zealot, and well, you get a Guardsman stats, and then you get Zealot. Now Zealot's very important because it gives you rerolls to hit in the first round of close combat, but it also makes you fearless, just permanently fearless until the Minotaur and Priest is dead. You also get war hymns, and war hymns are very interesting, and we're going to very quickly explore them. What war hymns allow you to do is, when you're in close combat, and only in close combat, you must take a leadership test on the priest leadership, and if you pass, this is before any blows have been struck, you get to choose one of 3 buffs. The first buff is you get to reroll your wounds, so obviously in the first round of combat, if you have rerolls to hit from Zealot and then rerolls to wound from your war hymn, that's great. The second one you get is reroll your armor saves, and the third one is your priest gets to make a smash attack. Problem with this is it relies on your army being in close combat, and we've already discussed how Guard are a horde army, but we're a shooting horde army. So if you're in close combat, you're already on the wrong foot. When you're in close combat, what you want to do is to get out of close combat as quickly as possible. Normally the best way of doing that is by dying as quickly as possible. So you want your opponent to charge you in their turn and just wipe you out, hopefully, or not wipe you out in your turn, not wipe you out in their turn, sorry, not wipe you out in your turn, and then wipe themselves out in their second turn. But so rerolling armor saves is going to mean you're going to be stuck in combat for longer, which is bad. If you're rerolling damage and hits, you're going to be stuck in combat because you're going to be doing damage to your opponent, which is potentially reducing the amount of damage you're going to take, which might sound a bit wrong, but you're never going to, unless you've geared this blob squad out for close combat, which you shouldn't be doing because you want to be shooting them. You're just spending a lot. The whole thing. What I'm trying to get is, maybe we're not making a lot of sense, but what I'm trying to get at is, if you're taking Minotaur and Priest and you're putting that in a shooting blob, that's wrong, because you're buffing them in close combat for close combat when they're for shooting. Second reason why I don't like war hymns is that they have to take the leadership test on the priest's leadership, which is leadership 7, which means only 50% of the time you're actually going to make the leadership test, and 50% of the time this isn't enough to rely upon. So you've got the reason. So we're going to discount the priest. He buffs you in the wrong way. His buffs don't synergize with your orders, number 1. So they're not synergizing with your orders. They're buffing you in the wrong way. And the third downside actually is, whilst you're fearless, means you don't take leadership checks. It means you don't get to go to ground. If you don't get to go to ground, as I've talked about before with conscripts, and I'm actually going to do a separate video on conscripts, but with conscripts, you get a 5-up cover save from being behind them. Go to ground, it's a 4-up. If you can't go to ground, you're on that 5-up cover save. What about if you're in a ruin holding an objective? If you can't go to ground, you can't get that sweet 3-up. Behind an Aegis defense line, can't get that sweet 2-up cover save from going to ground. So it's Minotaur Priests, a lot of people like them. A lot of people go 25 points for all these buffs, great, but they're actually counterintuitive. The second advisor, which is again 25 points, is the Commissar. And Commissars are absolutely amazing, but they're not as obviously as amazing as, you know, they don't look amazing, but they are. So unlike a priest, you only get one buff. There's only one special. He's got 2 special rules: stubborn and summary execution. So you're thinking, hang on, I've only got stubborn. So, oh yeah, you know, I'm not fearless, I'm only stubborn. I haven't got war hymns, you know. I haven't got zealot. What's going on here? I'm not, you know. Let me explain to you why the Commissar is subtler, but much more powerful for a competitive shooting guard list. So number 1, you're stubborn, which means you're always going to be taking leadership tests on the Commissar's leadership, and no matter how much you lose combat by, no matter how much someone's psychic powers you down, you know, losing like -1 leadership psychic powers, -2 leadership psychic powers, you are stubborn leadership 9 on the Commissar. So no matter what, you're leadership 9, which is great. Leadership 9 is also very important because it means that all your orders are going off that little bit more reliably. If you're taking a Commissar and putting him in a blob squad, that makes that whole squad leadership 9. So rather than trying to get 8 or less on the order leadership check, you're trying to get 9 or less. Just increases those odds just by that significant amount. If you had a Voxcaster in there as well, that means you get to take a leadership 9 order test with a reroll. Fantastic. And that's the number 1 main reason. That's the number 1 best thing about them. That's the number 1 buff. They give you that leadership buff, which means your guys are going to stick around and they're going to obey orders more reliably. I can't say this enough. Orders. You need your orders to basically go off successfully every turn, no matter how you figure out how you want to do that. We're talking competitive army list, 1750 points. You've got a few extra points to throw around. You need to make sure your orders are going off. Every turn, every blob that doesn't manage to receive an order you'll notice its firepower is nothing. You put 2 blobs side by side, one gets its orders off, one gets its psychic powers off, and the other one doesn't. It feels like the one that didn't get any buffs is just doing nothing. That's how important your buffs are for guard. Your men literally don't do anything without them. Okay? So you need those Commissars. Now the second rule has a summary execution. Summary execution is a fantastic rule because it's one that your opponents don't, they know it exists, but they don't see it coming. Summary execution is very simple. Let's say you've got to take a leadership check for taking 25% casualties or more into your shooting phase. You roll your leadership test. Let's say you get a 10. Bugger. Summary execution now means you get to try a reroll from other sources first before you execute someone. So it's really important. So if you've got a regimental standard in your company command squad, and your company command squad's within 12 inches of your blob squad, it's got the Commissar in. Your blob squad takes the leadership check. They fail. They then get to reroll from the regimental standard first before summary execution kicks in. So in the old codex, it used to be you got executed straight away. It's an immediately you execute someone. Now the old codex, it said you get to execute someone and then you get to reroll the leadership check. Now you execute someone and you automatically pass. So much better. So much better. So your guys are receiving orders more likely. Your summary execution means you're pseudo fearless. I mean, yeah, maybe you've got to blow a guy's brains out, but you're not actually going to fail the leadership test. And because and this is the last sort of subtle buff, because essentially you're fearless, but you're not actually fearless, which means you can still go to ground. So you've got your blob squad there. You receive it. Your orders are going off every single time. So you're buffed to fuck, and then you need to go. You need to go to ground. No problem. Get that 2-up cover save, 3-up cover save, 4-up cover save. You know, absolutely fantastic. Now, Summary Execution, there's one downside where you have to roll a dice. On a 1 to 2, your opponent actually chooses who you execute. On a 3, 4, 5, or 6, you get to choose. This can mean your opponent can actually physically execute that melter gun guy that you really needed, or your autocannon guy that you really needed, or well, it'll be technically more likely a las cannon guy that you really needed. Doesn't often go off. I mean, you should have your regimental standard backing you up. You should be Legion 9. It doesn't often happen. It might happen sometimes, but this is why I tend to keep my infantry squads cheap, because it means if you get that 1 or a 2, the most your opponent's going to kill is a 10-point autocannon, maybe a 5-point grenade launcher, you know. So there are ways to mitigate it, but it's just something to bear in mind. So Minotaur and Priests, I don't like them. They make you better at close combat. You're never going to win close combat anyway in a competitive scene. Commissars make you better at receiving orders. Because they make you better at receiving orders, they make you better at shooting, which is big thumbs up, and they help you retain your survivability. Big thumbs up. So the last advisor, which I know a lot of you are going to have been expecting me to talk about this one, is the Primaris Psyker. Primaris Psyker is 50 points. It's leadership 9 and mastery level 1 Psyker. You also actually come with a force weapon, so essentially a power weapon, and a fire pinvan with a refractor shield. Now, you're an independent character, which means 2-up lookout, sir. Something I should say, the priest is more survivable than the Commissar, by the way. Just go backtracking a second, because the priest is an independent character, which means a 2-up lookout, sir. But a Commissar is only a character, so only a 4-up lookout, sir. Now, the other interesting thing is that the Commissar, when he joins his unit at the beginning of the game before deployment, or during deployment, he actually essentially counts as part of that unit. He can't leave it, and for all intents and purposes, he counts as that unit. So if you lose the whole unit, let's say you've got a 30-man blob with the Commissar in, that's still only 1 kill point, not 2. Because he's a character, he's not an independent character. Very important to remember. A lot of people will try and kill your Commissars out, and kill your whole blobs out for try and get extra kill points, and then you explain to them that that's still only 1 kill point. Look, here's the rule. Counts for all intents and purposes about the squads. Anyway, go back to the Primaris Psyker. So the Primaris Psyker is double the points of a Commissar and a Priest, but he comes with the power weapon, great. Comes with the fire pinvan, pretty good, and he's a Psyker. The problem I have with the Primaris Psyker is if you compare him to other people's armies, he's way overcosted. Okay, you look at a Space Marine Librarian, that is 65 points. Space Marine Librarian is weapon skill 5, Primaris Psyker is weapon skill 4. They're both ballistic skill 4, but the Librarian is strength 4, toughness 4, your leadership 10, 3-up save, 4-up, I think he's got a 4-up invan, I think, but you know. Oh, and they shall know no fear, access to chapter tactics, all this extra stuff for 15 points. Comes with the bolt pistol rather than a las pistol. You know what I'm saying? So Primaris Psykers are vastly overcosted. You compare that to like an Elder Warlock who's coming with, you know, 4-ups, you know, all these extra things. 4-up weapon skill, ballistic skill, wounds, and you know, high initiative, higher leadership, 4-up save. So like a Primaris Psyker and a Warlock are actually pretty close in terms of stats. The Warlock's got higher initiative and higher save, and I think a higher leadership test check. But guess what? It's only 30 points. Warlock's only 30 points, so you know you're getting more in an Elder Warlock for less points. You see why I don't like Primaris Psykers? They are good though. They are essential. You know, if you want, you know, if you can find the points, if you're paying 1850, 2,000 points competitive list, if you're, let's say you're playing in a 2,000 tournaments, I know a lot of the American tournaments over you know, like to be 2,000 points. Across the pond, like to be 2,000 points. A lot of people like to play 2,000 point games. Definitely just wanging, and you're taking pure guard, just wanging 3 Primaris Psykers. Don't even think about it. If you're playing less than 2,000 points, 1850, 1750, definitely 1500, you still want to get your psychic powers in there, but you're going to start looking at allying in, you know, why don't you ally in yourself a librarian? You know, ally yourself in an inquisitor. You know, inquisitors are very cheap access to psychic powers. But anyway, so the Primaris Psyker, he's really important. Obviously, he's given, you know, he's given you all those psychic buffs we talked about in other videos. You know, you're essentially going to be just rolling on divination every time. There are other psychic disciplines out there. He has access to a lot of them, but you are essentially it's going to be divination 99% of the time, just because you need prescience. You're a shooting army. You know, you're going to spam prescience. I mean, if you're really lucky, let's say you take your 3 Primaris Psykers, you go on prescience, you go on divination on every single table, and you get perfect timing on one of your Psykers. Okay, if you get perfect timing on one of your Psykers, and he's got prescience, what you do is you let's say you've got a las cannon blob, and you put him in the las cannon blob. You roll and put you roll your psychic powers, put prescience on the blob. Great, re-rolling hits. You roll psychic towers, roll a psychic test, put perfect timing on the blob. You're ignoring cover. Excellent. And then you roll. Then it comes to the shooting phase. You take a leadership test for your orders. Bring it down. Tank hunter, monster hunter. No longer, if with perfect timing, it allows you to no longer have to choose between fire on my target order and bring it down order. So if you've got a Tau Hammerhead coming at you, most people don't use Hammerheads. Let's use like, you know, if you go take a Tau big gun, you go take on a Riptide. But let's say Hammerhead or Ravager, or more likely competitive, you know, we're looking at Wave Serpents. So you've got a Wave Serpent coming towards you. So I'm a 12. So yeah, you only need a 3 to glance it, but ideally you want to do more than glance it. So you're ignoring its cover, you're ignoring it, and you're ignoring its Jinx save, you're re-rolling damage on it, and you're rolling hits on it. That's a dead Wave Serpent. You shoot 4 las cannons, that's a dead Wave Serpent. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. So Primaris Psykers are really important. They give you that extra level of buffs. If you're lucky, you'll get triple buffs off. Now the only thing to mention is if you suffer a perils test, if you put a Primaris Psyker and a Commissar on the same blob, and your Primaris Psyker suffers a perils test, before the results of the perils test, your Commissar will execute your Primaris Psyker. Bam, dead. So sometimes it's worth, you know how I've mentioned about having these little 10-man squads that sit behind your main blobs? Sometimes it's worth to put your Primaris Psyker in a little 10-man squad. So you've got a 40-man strong platoon. You put 30 in a blob with the Commissar. You keep 10 separate with your Primaris Psyker if you want to. And then essentially those 10 guys are 10 additional wounds for your Primaris Psyker. Just something to bear in mind. Often I just lump them all together. Fuck the casualties. You know, you want to get as much damage as possible done. Okay, so that covers all the advisors. Any questions, please leave a comment. And tune in next time, where hopefully we'll be covering things like guard mobility and how to get your infantry moving around the board. Thank you.